the talk station is proud to present The War Files. The War Files, a selection of interviews honoring our warriors of the greatest generation, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam.
Your name is?
Ethel Phillips. I was Ethel M. Clift, C-L-I-F-T, in my service period.
Where are you from originally?
I'm a farmer's daughter from Woodbury County, Iowa. Sioux City is the county seat. And we lived on a corn farm about 25 miles southeast of Sioux City.
All right, now tell me about your situation when the war broke out. You're in Iowa at the time?
Well, initially I was in Iowa. I was with the Wind Charger Corporation in Sioux City. That was the first time we heard about wind chargers. And eventually that corporation was bought out by Zenith Radio. And at that one point in the winter of 1942, everything was being retooled for the war effort, everything. And I had been in the export division of Wind Charger Corporation.
Now, the name of the company was Wind Charger?
Wind Charger without a D.
Okay, Wind Charger.
That was the corporate name. And I had been out of business school to be sent to my first job was with the Wind Charger Corporation export department. And we were shipping these wind turbines in quantities to South America, South Africa, and we were making them in different sizes. The land west of the Missouri River, except for the cities, didn't have electricity. And they would buy a 6-volt wind charger to operate their radios.
Wow. And
a 32-volt might make enough electricity they could light a small house. And then we had some huge ones, an installation in Newfoundland, and another installation in the west of Ireland that powered the Atlantic cable.
So now you were working for Wind Charger when the war breaks out.
Right.
What was the feeling among your co-workers when the invasion of Pearl Harbor occurs, the attack?
Well, the young men were being sent into the army, even into the military, by enlistment, or then they were drafted, and. I just felt I wanted to change, because we were getting so we couldn't get delivery. We had to license them because they had certain copper in them.
Right.
You couldn't have. The licenses were getting hard to place, and then the safe shipment was another point, because the Atlantic was prowled by the German submarines.
Right.
And everything was getting upset. So. A friend and I decided to go to California. She had friends in Long Beach, and the two of us took off and went to Southern California, landed in Los Angeles.
How old were you at this time?
I'd been with Wind Charger 5 years. I was about 23 at that time. Okay. And I was using the LA Times one ads. Of course, jobs were prevalent all over, but L.A. was spread out for miles, and airplane plants and plants that supplied articles for the airplane plants were all over. And I got down in the area of the L.A. City Hall, which was a new high-rise building with the grass plot all around it. And looked very inviting. But then I looked catty-corner across the street, and I saw the Los Angeles Times building, which is relatively new. And out of curiosity, I crossed over and I went in and was astounded at a huge entranceway with a globe of the world, a bronze globe about 20 feet of diameter. And I browsed around and went over to the elevator, and it had the names of the departments that were upstairs. And I took the elevator and went up to the personnel department and walked in and asked if they accepted voluntary applications. And they said yes. They sat me down, and I've spent an afternoon practically taking all kinds of Wadsworth reports, or examinations, not only in the technical things, but all kinds of personal attitude about and everything. And I got through, and they said, well, they'd let me know. And I walked back to the Evangeline Hotel, and I went in, and a little cubbyhole for my mail, I had a note, and they asked me to come to work the next day. So
it happened while you were walking back to the...
Yeah.
All right. So what did you do at the Los Angeles Times?
Well, at first I had to go through a stenographic pool. And I soon learned that the good dictators, the girls ran to get those records, because if you didn't get those records, you probably got someone that hummed and hawed about with things. And I caught on to that. But after a preliminary time in there, I was assigned to the purchasing department. And it was they were combined with the Times Mirror Publishing Company, and did the telephone books and other manuscripts. And then they started carrying news about the Marine Corps was going to have a women's reserve. We already had the wax and the waves as spars. And I went down one day and enlisted.
To join the Marine Corps?
Joined the Marine Corps.
Why did you join the Marine Corps?
I just felt it. Well, for one thing, every letter I got from Iowa, there were always my mother and my sister or others that would write me and say, well, so-and-so got drafted and so-and-so enlisted. And among all my cousins, I eventually had 15 male first cousins that entered the service. And I just thought, well, I'll go ahead and do that. So I went down to the recruiting office in Pershing Square and enlisted, and they put me on duty the next day, March 11, 1943, along with 3 of the girls that had clerical background. And we stayed there for 6 or 7 weeks until a group had been indoctrinated in the Bronx and came out with uniforms on to relieve us. And then we finally got our chance to go down at the Southern Pacific Railroad station across the United States to the Bronx.
Now, were you in a uniform at this point, or were you in civilian clothes?
We were still in civilian clothes. And we were in civilian clothes for 3 or 4 weeks, I think, by the time we were given hats early so they could keep us distinct from the Navy girls who had Navy hats on. And then eventually we were outfitted with the uniforms, not fitted, but outfitted, I'll say. And by then it was the second week of June.
Now, what was it like? You said a moment ago, outfitted, not fitted. So first off, what was the uniform like, and how did they fit?
Well, they had some size, but they didn't necessarily conform with each individual's
shape and
but on our final day of the 6 weeks indoctrination, we were to pass in review before Eleanor Roosevelt and Madame Chiang-Kai-shek. And it was hot. It was the second week of June. And
you're at Hunter College.
Hunter College
in the Bronx, right?
Bronx. And it really was hot. And we got permission to appear without our blouses or jackets, our wool jackets. So we passed in review in our khaki shirts and ties and a wool skirt. And a great part of that regiment I was in was sent to headquarters Marine Corps personnel.
What was it like? I mean, you've been in business, you've been independent. Now you're under the command of I guess a sergeant
right,
and
a sergeant or trainee.
And what was it like for you? I mean, was this something you enjoyed, or I mean, were you surprised by it, or?
I put up with it because we were at war in the Pacific Rim, still at war in Europe, and it was time I didn't expect too much.
You had worldly experience, so you weren't really surprised by what you were going through there at Hunter's College and boot camp. Where'd you go to after boot camp?
We were, most of the whole regiment went to personnel department of the Marine Corps, which was, what we think of it as in D.C. It actually was located in the Navy Annex across the south border of the National Cemetery.
Right.
And I think about it afterwards. I rejoiced in that assignment because I was looking over, down, looking from the Arlington Heights down across the bridge to the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Monument, and in the distance was the Congress.
Right.
Congress.
What was it like being a member of the Women Marine Reserve Auxiliary? What was it like being a member of the auxiliary?
Washington, D.C. at that period didn't have many young Marines. They were all at war.
Mm-hmm.
I felt appreciated. The citizens had become accustomed to the wax a whole 12 months earlier, and we were the last service to, I think, be set up as women.
Was it a feeling that you were making, and I would assume so, that you were making a contribution to the war effort? I mean, you had
Yes.
Rosie the Riveter, but the fact that you were now in a uniform, did it give you a greater sense of camaraderie, if you will, with those who were in battle?
Yes, and my assignment was with the officers' temporary promotion section.
Okay.
And I typed the officers' temporary promotions as they needed them from every month or 60 days, depending on the casualties and then depending on the new income, newly personnel that entered the Marine Corps. Members were taken in from Navy at Annapolis. Graduates could choose the Marine Corps if they chose.
Right.
Same thing with West Point,
Right.
Virginia Military Academy, and a lot of the other colleges.
Yeah.
But they came in with this specific position in rank. If there was 20 graduates in a class, you were number one to.
Right, you were by number.
And that number they lived by it in the early promotions. Higher ranks at times had convened a promotion board to make considerations, but otherwise you stayed in your position in rank.
Well, what was it like for you as far as going to work? Did you was it a normal 8 to 5 time frame, or did you work long hours? And by the way, in the process, did you were you engaged in any military activities such as marching, things of this nature?
Well, we would turn out once a month and drill a bit in the back of the headquarters on some sand, and the shoes we wore had soles like cardboard in those days. You make a few turns on the sand, we were wearing out our shoes. And on rare occasions, I did get to, in uniform, of course we were in uniform at all times. You never appeared to put our head out of doors without a hat on. Mm-hmm. And we had no civilian clothes whatsoever. If we went to church, we were in uniform.
the war is underway. What is the conversation? What do you have among your fellow Marines?
Pretty much about the job, and I ended up eating lunch in the government cafeteria in the basement, along with the civil service workers, and some of the officers would have their luncheon there. We talked about what we heard in the newspapers and saw in the newspapers, and later on, I remember after Churchill and the Russian and
Stalin, Churchill, and Roosevelt.
Yes, and FDR had that meeting at Yalta.
Right.
He came back, and we had a sound system in headquarters. And when Roosevelt spoke to the Congress on his return, his speech was faltering, and you knew he wasn't in good shape. And then it was just shortly after that he died in Georgia.
Right.
And Truman became president. And I think we went into the district and walked around the White House after some of those things. And at times we would be given a chance to go in for a parade. And I remember one man that came back after being imprisoned in the Philippines was so emaciated, and he was real tall. And that was just nice to stand along for one of those parades, but you were in always having somebody to salute, you know.
Well, okay, so you had to salute as a,
right.
What was your rank?
I became a staff sergeant. That was about the time they ordered us to move out of.
So you joined the Marine Corps in 1943, and how long were you in Washington, D.C.?
From June of 43 to September of 45. I was typing a promotion letter at the time the Japanese surrendered. And people that had some rank in headquarters were coming trying to read over my shoulder while I typed, because they knew the temporary promotions were going to stop.
Right.
And I think I retrieved a copy of that last temporary promotion letter. I ended up dating it the 16th of August.
Wow.
Yeah. The Japanese surrendered on the 14th, I think. And so I started thinking then that I was going to get my discharge. And I really wanted to get back in the business world, because the way civil service personnel conducted things did not inspire me.
In your job, the day that the Japanese did surrender, first off, was it anticipated? I mean, was there? Obviously, we were winning the war. So what was the feeling? Was it?
I felt that we'd probably be disbanded to some degree, and as it was, I was there in about 5 or 6 weeks after the Japanese.
But was there celebration? What was the feeling? The morale?
There was celebration, and then I really wanted to get away from the civil service. I did not want to continue in government service. I enjoyed the business, export trade so well.
That Germany had already capitulated.
Right.
Was there a mass exodus of women Marines in waves and WACs?
One of my friends stayed in for a while, and then she took a civil service job. That was one that we used to go to lunch with on Sundays and stuff. And I don't know as a general thing. I know a number must have stayed in civil service.
What brought you to Carteret County?
In San Francisco, On George Washington's birthday, I was introduced by a couple that her husband was in the Navy, and after peace had come, this Navy man and somebody he had known in pre-war days in the Navy in the Atlantic were both on a Navy group that went out to Bikini Island to test an atom bomb. And they came back to San Francisco, and my friend who from Iowa came out to San Francisco, and they introduced my husband, my future husband, introduced me at a dance that the Navy Department put on for their ship when it came back into San Francisco. And that was on George Washington's birthday in 1947.
And your soon-to-be husband's name was?
Edmund Gorham Phillips. He was born and raised in Morehead City.
What did he do in the Navy?
He was a machinist. He was always under deck. He wanted to come out and be his own boss. And he had signed up for the schooling for contracting in Kansas City, Missouri. And by September, we were married in September, came to live the first year in Kansas City, and he went to school there. And I was employed by the Butler Manufacturing Company Export Department.
Your experience in the Marine Corps, I mean, what's your feeling about it?
Well, I felt good about it, and I had a 5-inch, three-ring binder full of pictures and everything that went on during that period of time. And the National Cathedral always kept me on their calendar list, and they had some beautiful pictures.
Looking back at your experience in your career, it was unusual for women to join the military.
Yes.
Do you think it's now something that...
Well, they do practically everything nowadays.
Right.
And I just saw the office side of it.
Ms. Phillips, have you been to the World War II Memorial yet?
No, I haven't. I made a trip some time ago and stopped over long enough to do some things in Washington. But I haven't seen that latest memorial, and I wouldn't think of traveling.
Question I have for you is, and I've asked this of everyone, and not until 2000 did we begin to build or construct a memorial for those who had served in World War II. Why do you think that is?
Well, I don't know. I begin to think that they must have that mall pretty well lined with memorials.
Well, they do, but they've got space. They've found space for a very nice memorial. I'm just wondering, when you got out of the Marine Corps, and of course you were stateside, but did you ever keep up with other women Marines or others that you met in the service?
Just with that one that was from Iowa to begin with, that was in the waves. But she married, and we did see them when we lived in Chicago for 2.5 years before we came back to Morehead. But unfortunately, she died with her first baby, and her husband wrote me about it, and I haven't heard from them since.
You feel proud about your service
I do.
I mean, being a woman Marine was a brand new concept.
I know.
And you were one of the first.
I think I was. We ended up getting to leave. I think it said 6th Regiment. I think that on something I've gotten. So I think we're probably the 6th group.
So March 10, 1943, you enlisted in the newly formed Marine Corps, and our guest, Ethel Phillips. Ethel Clift is the maiden name. Well, thank you very much for your service, and to your husband as well, and thank you for the time for this interview.
Well, you're welcome.
It's been an honor to interview you.
You've been listening to The War Files, a selection of interviews honoring our warriors of the greatest generation, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. The War Files is a TalkStation presentation.